What if the person who promised to love you turned into your worst nightmare? What if the man who vowed to protect you sold you to survive? And what if one night you couldn't take it anymore? This is the story of Suzanne Carter. A woman pushed to the edge of sanity. A wife turned prisoner in her own home. And a final, blood-soaked night that changed everything. This case is not just shocking, it's unforgettable. Because it challenges everything we think we know about victims, justice, and the price of silence. This video contains emotionally intense themes. To truly understand how love became a weapon and survival became a crime, you need to watch this story to the end. You are watching Crime of Passion, where true stories of love, betrayal, and deadly consequences unfold. If you believe stories like these deserve to be heard, click subscribe, turn on the bell, and join us as we uncover the truth, one tragedy at a time. The campus cafe buzzed with nervous energy. Students clutched coffee cups like lifelines, fingers dancing over keyboards, whispering anxiously about midterms. Suzanne Carter sat by the window, reviewing color palettes for a freelance project, when a sudden shift in the air made her look up. He stood there like he belonged. Stuart Carter. Worn leather jacket. Tired but confident smirk. A scar on his knuckle that caught the light as he sipped his espresso. He noticed her. Winked. And in that single moment, Suzanne's neatly ordered world tilted. She wouldn't know it then, but that look, that tiny spark, would change her life forever. Suzanne was in her junior year, majoring in psychology. She was thoughtful, soft-spoken, the kind of girl who stayed behind after lectures to ask professors follow-up questions. Her dorm desk was covered with color-coded sticky notes and half-finished art projects. She still FaceTimed her mom every Sunday and cried during Disney movies. Stuart, on the other hand, was nothing like her. He wasn't even a student at the university anymore. He had dropped out a year earlier. Rumor had it he was a freelancer in sales. No one knew exactly what that meant. But he carried himself with the kind of defiance that made rules seem negotiable. Tattoos peeked out from under his shirt sleeves. He talked about motorcycles, open highways, and how the best education came from living, not studying. Their first conversation was electric. "You're a psychology major? Then you probably already know what I'm thinking," he teased. Suzanne smiled shyly. "That you want to impress me?" He laughed. "Am I succeeding?" That night, they met at a local dive bar. Stuart greeted the bouncer by name, slid a whiskey sour into her hand before she could even open the menu, and launched into stories about his road trip to Arizona, bar fights in Reno, and a camping spot somewhere in Utah that, he claimed, changed his life. To Suzanne, it was like flipping through a travel magazine in real life. She had never even been on a plane. His stories, whether true or embellished, made her heart race. And then, there was that kiss. Leaning against his beat-up Camaro, he pulled her close, looked at her like she was the only person on earth, and kissed her with the intensity of someone who lived like there might not be a tomorrow. For a girl raised on routine and caution, it felt like leaping into the unknown. She didn't tell her parents about him right away. There were warning signs, small but unsettling. He hated being questioned. When she joked about his tattoo, a crumbling clock with no hands, he grabbed her wrist a little too firmly and said, "Some things are better left unexplained." Her roommate, Jess, noticed too. "You okay with how he talks to you? Just be careful, sus." Even her sociology professor once pulled her aside. "Your boyfriend's been waiting for you outside every day this week. That normal for you?" But she brushed it off. Stuart was just protective, she told herself. Passionate. Intense. Things her previous boyfriends lacked. Their relationship moved fast. Within 6 months, they had moved into a small apartment above a pizza shop. A year later, they got married at the courthouse. No fancy wedding. Just her, him, and 2 witnesses they barely knew. Suzanne wore a simple white dress. Her parents came but looked heartbroken. "Are you sure?" her mother had whispered just before the vows. "Yes," Suzanne said. And she meant it? At least, she thought she did. The first few months of marriage felt like an adventure. They made late-night grocery runs and played card games on the living room floor. Stuart would come home with stories from his job at the pharmaceutical distributor, always complaining about incompetent co-workers or rude customers. Suzanne would laugh, listen, and rub his shoulders. But cracks started forming. Stuart began controlling little things. What she wore. Who she talked to. What she posted online. He insisted on checking her phone. At first, it seemed like jealousy. Maybe even flattery. But soon, it became control. He would say things like, "I just care about you," or "I know how guys think." I was one of them. When she got freelance design clients, he insisted on approving them. "Some of these guys just want to talk to you," he claimed. Don't be naive. Gradually, Suzanne's world became smaller. Her circle of friends shrank. Calls to her mom became shorter and less frequent. Even Jess, her old roommate, stopped replying. She started second-guessing herself. Stuart had a way of making her feel guilty for wanting independence. If she asked to spend time alone, he sulked. If she said no to something, he became cold. But then he'd make it up to her. Flowers. Late-night drives. Whispered apologies. "I just love you too much," he'd say, and Suzanne, wanting so badly to believe it, forgave him. Looking back, she would later say, "I thought I was building a life with him. But what I was really doing, was disappearing inside of him." It's important to remember that abuse doesn't always start with violence. Sometimes it starts with a smile, a kiss, a promise. And by the time the fear shows up, it feels like love in disguise. Stuart never hit her, not then. But he hit her spirit. Slowly. Quietly. With every doubt he planted. Every freedom he took. By the end of their second year, Suzanne had stopped dreaming. Her art sat untouched. Her textbooks collected dust. Her eyes, once bright, dulled by the quiet weight of control. The man who once made her feel like the world was an open road now made her afraid to leave the house. And still, she told herself, this is love. Love is hard. Marriage takes work. But deep down, in the quiet corners of her soul, she began to wonder. If this was love, why did it feel so much like fear? The first year of marriage was quiet and unremarkable. Suzanne and Stuart pieced together a life from scratch, moving into a small second-floor apartment that always smelled faintly of garlic from the Italian restaurant below. They bought furniture from IKEA, argued over paint swatches, and spent their evenings curled up on the couch watching sitcom reruns. To outsiders, they were just another newlywed couple, trying to figure it all out. Stuart worked a mid-level job at a pharmaceutical company, bringing home enough to keep the lights on. Suzanne filled the gaps with freelance graphic design gigs, working from home and occasionally visiting clients at local cafes. They ate a lot of takeout, laughed over bad Netflix movies, and, For a little while, it worked. But the cracks were there, barely visible, just under the surface. By the end of that first year, Stuart began to change. His mood swings became more frequent. He started sleeping poorly, drinking more heavily, and complaining about co-workers who didn't respect him. He'd come home red-faced and bitter, pacing while muttering under his breath about idiots and incompetence. At first, Suzanne tried to help. She offered to cook more often, to keep the apartment quieter when he needed rest. She listened patiently when he ranted about his boss or deadlines. But nothing seemed to calm him. Nothing was enough. Arguments began to spark over small, insignificant things. A dish left in the sink. A comment Suzanne made during dinner that he deemed disrespectful. A glance at her phone that lasted too long. Stuart didn't yell at first. Instead, he'd withdraw, go silent for hours, sometimes even a full day. The silence was colder than shouting. Then came the guilt-tripping. I work all day and come home to this, or you're lucky I put up with this. Suzanne, raised to keep the peace, began to shrink. She apologized for things she hadn't done. She adjusted her behavior to avoid setting him off. She stopped wearing lipstick when they went out. Stuart said it looked like she was trying too hard. For their 5th anniversary, Suzanne hoped for a small moment of joy. They visited a local jewelry store. Her fingers lingered over a delicate 24-karat gold necklace. She didn't ask for it, just admired it. But Stuart saw the price $1,200 and his expression darkened. He didn't say anything right away. That evening, she found the necklace sitting on their dresser, the receipt tucked underneath. I wanted to do something nice, Stuart said flatly. Suzanne smiled, touched it gently, and thanked him. But something about his voice made her stomach twist. She wore the necklace only once, to her friend Lacey's birthday party. She felt beautiful, confident. For a moment, she felt like herself again. But when she returned home that night, it was gone. The clasp must have broken. She searched the Uber, retraced her steps, called the restaurant. Nothing. It had vanished. She stood at the edge of the bed, trembling. Stuart was already asleep. For a brief, terrifying moment, she considered lying about it. The next morning, the storm came. You lost $1,000 necklace. Stuart roared, his voice cracking with fury. A coffee mug shattered against the kitchen wall. Suzanne flinched, heart racing. What the hell is wrong with you? Do you think money grows on trees? I'll find it, she said softly, barely above a whisper. I'll call again. With what money? He snapped. You gonna sell more of your cute little logos to pay for it? That fight followed Stuart to work. Later that week, after being reprimanded for underperformance, he exploded on his manager. The altercation turned physical. He punched the man. Broke his nose. He was fired on the spot. That evening, Stuart sat at the kitchen table, scrolling furiously through job listings, bank statements, and past due bills. Suzanne hovered in the doorway, unsure whether to speak. Her hands shook. And then, he laughed. It wasn't the kind of laugh she recognized. It was low. Cold. Hollow. You know what I heard today, he said without looking up. Some guys rent out their wives when things get tight. Suzanne stared at him. He looked up. His eyes were flat. Empty. Guess we'll find out how much you're really worth. The air left her lungs. She slapped him. Hard. Her palm stung. His reaction was instant. He struck back, not with his fist, but with the back of his hand, quick, brutal. She hit the refrigerator. Slid to the floor. The room spun. Her lip bled. Stuart crouched beside her, his voice chillingly calm. "Tomorrow night," he said. "You're going to do what needs to be done. For us." A car alarm wailed outside. Somewhere far away, a dog barked. But inside their apartment, all Suzanne could hear was the pounding of her own heart. That was the night she realized she didn't know the man she had married. Not at all. It started at a cheap motel off the interstate. Stuart insisted it was temporary. The place smelled of bleach and mildew, with buzzing neon lights that flickered outside the curtained window. Suzanne stood by the bed, heart racing, palms damp. She wore the red dress Stuart had chosen, tight, revealing, not her style. Her stomach churned. Then the knock came. The man who entered was older. Mid-50s. Graying beard. He reeked of bourbon and wore a smile that made her skin crawl. He didn't offer a name. Just dropped his coat and started unbuckling his belt. Outside, Stuart sat in the car. He checked his watch, browsed online escort forums, and scrolled through apps where men posted ads for companionship. To him, this was business. Simple supply and demand. Inside, Suzanne's mind splintered. She went through the motions, floating above her own body, staring at the stains on the ceiling. When it was over, she stumbled into the motel shower. She stood under scalding water for nearly an hour, scrubbing herself raw. She cried, quietly, but not for long. It didn't end there. One night became two. Then four. A week later, Stuart showed her a small stack of cash. "Not bad, right?" he grinned. "See? You're good at this." Suzanne said nothing. Her silence wasn't agreement. It was survival. By the third week, Stuart had a system. Burner phones. Coded messages. Fake names. He booked clients, vetted them online, made sure they paid in cash. He called it work. But it didn't feel like work. It felt like drowning. Then came the move. "We're bringing it home," Stuart announced. "More private. Better money. Less driving." Suzanne's blood ran cold. "Our home," she whispered. "It's safer. More control. We make the rules now." She refused. He hit her. Hard. He dragged her by the wrist, shoved her into a wall, and pointed at the coffee table. "This is our only shot," he snarled. "You lost that necklace. Time to earn it back." The first home client arrived that Friday. He was a corporate lawyer. Polished. Charming. Married. He complimented Suzanne's dress, then pinned her to the couch. When it was over, he left an extra $100 on the table. "For the ambience," he said. Stuart returned 10 minutes later. Pocketed the cash. Kissed her for it. The next week brought more men. A tech executive with a biting fetish. A college athlete who recorded without asking. A quiet man in his 60s who spoke gently until he didn't. Suzanne stopped eating. Stopped sleeping. Her skin turned pale. Her eyes, once bright and curious, were now vacant. Stuart flourished. He bought a new phone. Talked about Cancun. Upgraded his gym membership. He began using words like career and market value. Suzanne lost herself. She no longer responded to her name. She floated through each day, her mind retreating to a quiet place far from the bed, the couch, the men. But at night, when the house was still, she would stare at the ceiling and imagine slipping away. Ending it. All of it. One night, the thought came, crisp and clear. I could end this. It wasn't rage. It wasn't revenge. It was peace. Under the mattress, she hid a steak knife. It was small. Slightly dull. But it would do. She rehearsed the motion in her mind. Not dramatic. Just precise. She kept working. Kept pretending. Stuart never noticed the change. Then one night, as she cleaned up after a particularly violent client, she felt something break inside her. Not a snap. A silence. She walked to the mirror. Looked at the bruises on her collarbone. The redness around her wrists. And she nodded to herself. Tomorrow. Tomorrow it ends. It was supposed to be their biggest night yet. 4 clients. High-paying. Returning customers. Stuart was giddy, practically vibrating with excitement. He called it a milestone the moment our side hustle becomes a real business. Suzanne sat in silence as he laid out the plan. Timed arrivals. Minimal overlap. Everything organized like clockwork. He even lit candles in the hallway and dimmed the lights. He wanted the place to feel upscale. To Suzanne, it felt like a crime scene waiting to happen. The first man arrived just after sunset. The scent of cigars clung to his clothes, mingling with sweat and expensive cologne. Stuart greeted him like an old friend, shook his hand, and gestured toward Suzanne with a grin. "You know what to do," his eyes said. Suzanne forced a nod. Upstairs, the air was thick. The man loosened his tie, licking his lips. Suzanne's hands trembled. She reached under the bed. Her fingers brushed cold steel. The knife. Before her brain could even fully register the decision, her body moved. One swift motion. The blade sliced clean. A soundless gasp. The man collapsed. Downstairs, Stuart glanced at the time. 20 minutes. Should be finishing up, he muttered, sipping a beer. A scream pierced the house. Client 2 had just walked in, tall, fit, the one who always brought energy drinks and tried to charm her with gym stories. He heard the commotion and charged up the stairs. Suzanne turned just as he entered. He lunged. She sidestepped. The blade cut through his shirt, then deeper. Blood sprayed. He fell. Footsteps thundered from the hallway. Client 3, young, arrogant, the tech bro. He tried to flee. Suzanne caught him at the door. This one fought. But she didn't feel it. Her body moved like instinct. Fluid. Focused. The knife met its target. He dropped. Only one remained. The 4th client froze in the doorway. He raised his hands. "Please," he begged. "I didn't touch you yet. I was just coming in." Suzanne said nothing. Her expression was blank. The knife flashed again. And then, silence. Only Stuart remained. He appeared in the doorway, eyes wide, face pale. The beer bottle slipped from his hand. "What the hell did you do?" he choked, stumbling back. Suzanne turned slowly. Her face streaked with sweat. Blood soaked her arms. "I ended it," she said simply. Stuart backed away. "Suzanne, think about what you're doing." "I have," she replied. He turned to run. The knife struck with certainty. Stuart collapsed, gasping, grasping at the floor. He looked up at her, his mouth moving, trying to speak. No words came. She knelt beside him, watched the light leave his eyes. Then she stood. Calm. Cold. She walked to the bathroom, washed her hands, changed her clothes, and called the police. I'd like to report a crime, she said. Her voice was steady. When the officers arrived, they found her sitting on the blood-soaked carpet, hands resting calmly in her lap. Not resisting. Not crying. Just waiting. Detective Holloway had seen everything. At least, that's what he thought. But nothing could have prepared him for what he found at the Carter residence that night. 5 bodies. 1 woman. And a silence that seemed to swallow the entire house. Suzanne sat in the middle of it all, hands open in her lap, gaze unfocused. She didn't cry. She didn't resist. She barely even blinked. When Holloway entered, she looked up and said, "I'd like to tell you everything." "Start from the beginning," he replied, pulling up a chair. And she did. She talked for hours. Her voice never wavered. She explained it all: the early days, the love, the red flags, the controlling behavior. Then the motel rooms, the money, the clients, the cold-eyed man her husband had become. The fear. The survival. "Did you plan this?" Holloway asked at one point. "Not like you think," she said. "I just knew it would happen eventually." The confession was methodical. Precise. Chilling in its clarity. She recalled names, times, phrases Stuart had used. She recited client details like a ledger. It wasn't an outburst. It was a breakdown stretched over years, condensed into one catastrophic night. The case exploded in the media. Headlines screamed from every tabloid and news site: "Housewife turns vigilante, sex trafficking scandal ends in bloodbath, justice, or murder." True crime podcasts dissected every detail. Commentators debated whether Suzanne was a cold-blooded killer or a tragic product of prolonged abuse. The court case was a media circus. The defense showed photos of bruises, X-rays of cracked ribs, old messages Suzanne had sent to a friend saying, "I feel like I'm dying here." They played security footage from the motel: Stuart dragging her by the hair, shoving her into a room. They showed police reports of neighbors who had heard screaming but never called. The prosecution pushed a different narrative. She had options, the DA thundered. She could have left. She could have called the police. She could have escaped. Instead, she executed 5 men in cold blood. The jury struggled. They deliberated for 13 hours. Arguments grew heated. Some jurors cried. Others stared blankly at the table, torn between empathy and law. Finally, a verdict. 4 counts, not guilty, by reason of self-defense. 1 count, Stuart's murder, voluntary manslaughter. The judge sentenced Suzanne to 8 years. Parole possible in 3. She showed no emotion. Just nodded. The courtroom buzzed with mixed reactions. Some clapped. Others gasped. Protesters outside held signs that read, "System failure and she deserved better." Suzanne was led away in cuffs. Calm. Silent. As if she'd already accepted her fate long ago. Her story didn't end in that courtroom. It became a symbol. A case study. A cautionary tale. Was she a hero? A victim? A murderer? The answer, it seemed, was all three. Prison was a paradox. Suzanne Carter had never known peace until she was locked in a place designed to take it away. Her cell was small but clean. Quiet. Predictable. There were no surprises in prison, no late-night knocks, no whispered threats, no clients arriving with wads of cash and eyes that felt like knives. She spent her days in the library. Organizing books gave her something to control, something to rebuild. She found comfort in the alphabet. The Dewey Decimal System. Things that followed rules. Unlike her life, which had never made sense. She applied for educational programs, took courses online, and eventually earned a paralegal certificate. The irony wasn't lost on her, learning the laws that hadn't protected her, so she could help other women navigate them. Suzanne refused every interview request. Dozens came in from journalists, authors, documentarians. She ignored them all. Her story had already been told. Twisted. Debated. She had nothing left to prove to the world. Only to herself. After serving 5 years, Suzanne was granted parole. She stepped out of prison into a gray Oregon morning, breathing cold air like it was a new beginning. In many ways, it was. She changed her name. Dyed her hair. Moved into a modest apartment in a quiet coastal town. She found work at a local women's shelter, first as a receptionist, then as a counselor in training. Her past followed her. It always would. Some women at the shelter recognized her. They'd stare, then whisper. Eventually, one asked, "Are you her? The one from the news?" Suzanne didn't answer. She rolled up her sleeves instead, revealing the thin scars on her wrists. "These aren't from suicide," she said softly. "They're from the handcuffs. That final night." Word spread. And soon, women came to her not with questions, but with stories. Their own. Suzanne listened. Held hands. Made phone calls. Filled out paperwork. Walked survivors through legal forms. Sat with them through panic attacks. She never gave advice. Only truth. "The system failed me," she told them. "But it doesn't have to fail you." She never remarried. Never dated. Love, to her, had become something unrecognizable. Instead, she loved in other ways, through service, through presence, through showing women that survival was not just possible, but sacred. She kept a knife under her pillow. Not out of fear, but as a symbol. A reminder of what it cost her to reclaim her life. Old habits die hard. But so do old strengths. Each morning, she woke up, stretched, and made tea. She sat by the window and watched the tide roll in, the way it always did. Life wasn't perfect. It wasn't painless. But it was hers again. Suzanne Carter's story is one of heartbreak and horror. But it's also a story of silence. Of all the moments someone could have spoken up, but didn't. Of red flags ignored. Of a woman screaming without making a sound. It's easy to look at what she did and recoil. 5 lives ended. Blood on her hands. But if we stop there, we miss the deeper tragedy. The invisible wounds that came first. The system that didn't listen. The love that turned into a cage. She was failed by her friends. Her community. The legal system. And most devastatingly by the man she trusted most. But in the end, Suzanne made a choice. One no one should ever have to make. A choice born not from rage, but from desperation. from years of quiet suffering that eventually became too loud to ignore. Was she a victim? Yes. Was she a killer? Yes. These two truths don't cancel each other out. They coexist. And in their coexistence lies the complexity that makes this story unforgettable. The scariest monsters aren't the ones lurking in alleyways. They aren't strangers in masks. More often than not, they wear wedding bands. They make your coffee in the morning. They kiss you on the forehead. They say, "I'm doing this for us." And sometimes, when those monsters go too far, when the system shrugs, when the cries are ignored, they meet a reckoning of their own creation. Suzanne's story is not just a cautionary tale. It's a mirror. A reflection of everything we pretend not to see: the neighbor who never leaves the house, the friend whose smile doesn't reach her eyes, the co-worker who's always making excuses for bruises. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth that not all evil announces itself. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it looks like love. For legal scholars, her case is a turning point, an example of how far self-defense can stretch in the eyes of the law. For psychologists, it's a study in trauma and breaking points. For survivors, it's proof that even the most broken path can lead to a kind of freedom. But most importantly, for the women at the shelter where Suzanne now works, her story is something simpler. It's not a legal debate. Not a moral riddle. It's a warning. A lifeline. A reminder. Because when Suzanne rolls up her sleeves and shows them the faded scars on her wrists, not from attempted suicide, but from the cuffs that bound her after the worst night of her life, they listen. And when she says, "The system failed me," don't let it fail you, they believe her. In the end, Suzanne's legacy isn't the blood. It's the lives she now quietly helps rebuild. It's the way her story reminds us that silence can kill. And that the strongest thing a survivor can do is speak. Speak even if your voice shakes. Speak even if no one listens the first time. Speak because someone out there is still waiting for permission to tell the truth. Suzanne Carter's story haunts us not just because of how it ended, but because of how long it took anyone to ask, "Are you okay?" 5 lives ended in one night. But the real tragedy? It started long before that, with silence. Maybe you saw the signs. Maybe you've lived them. Maybe you know someone who smiles, just a little too tightly. Share this video. Speak up. And listen closely. Because sometimes, the most dangerous place in the world is behind a closed door that nobody's willing to knock on. Let us know in the comments, was Suzanne a victim, a villain, or both? Your voice matters. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Crime of Passion for more stories where love turns lethal and justice isn't always black and white. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and never ignore the quiet warning signs.